it's hard to decipher or just to kind of pick out the real gems from the pack just based on the CV. When someone applies for a job, this is a very personal thing. And a lot of people put a lot of effort into applying. And yeah, like I said, I just don't want to devalue their effort. Humans have biases, but AI has the same. Has plenty of bias in itself because it's just learned from us. I mean, obviously, I don't have a problem with people using AI to code because that is how you should do it these days.
We are live on the Objective Hiring Show with Aaron. Aaron, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks a lot, Tim. Thanks for having me.
It is absolutely our pleasure. And I'm wondering if we can kick things off by just getting a little bit more information about yourself and your role leading SkillLab's data science team.
Oh, yeah, sure. So I've been at SkillLab for about 2.5 years or so. And I was tasked with building the team, actually, from one person to now. I think we're 5 full-time, and we usually have a couple of interns with us. And data science in SkillLab is quite broad. We are responsible for the AI in our system. And we are also obviously doing all the standard data science work around reporting, monitoring, and we do a lot of work in occupation taxonomies, which is really important for SkillLab. SkillLab, we are looking our vision is that everyone has a pathway to employment, and we do that. Our mission is to kind of connect people with jobs and education through the universal language of skills. So we're really looking at using skills to help people get to employment, essentially. So we are really all about skills and how you can use them to find a job, basically. Yeah.
That's awesome. And yeah, it would be interesting to unpack that, particularly for me, in a bit more detail, because at Alooba we're also about skills, but probably from quite a different angle. So where does SkillLab play exactly, and how does it help job seekers? What's the business model? I'd love to understand a little bit more about the company.
Oh, yeah, sure. So our main client, you would say, is the public employment service, more government based kind of organizations or international organizations as well, where we kind of work with our clients. So the counselors who are helping people find jobs, basically we provide a way to actually help scale them up and help basically just help the counselor help the people find jobs, and we do that with kind of two sides of the same coin kind of application, where the counselors get to see how the users are progressing, and the users get a nice easy to use, I hope, fun user interface to kind of learn about themselves. And we actually basically kind of collaborate with the user to help them understand themselves, help them understand what skills they have. Because when you ask someone, can you write down 20 skills that you have, people will struggle. Even people that are really well aware of their skills and they're on the job market a lot and so on. But if you talk about mothers in Mexico who are looking for to understand what they could find a job, where they could find a job, can they find a job, what skills do they have, they need some kind of assistance and guidance. So we all do, and we basically kind of guide people through this process. We recommend skills, we get immediate feedback from them, and essentially build this kind of skill profile of a person, which we can then matched to potential careers, jobs, and education. Through skills. So everything is skill based. Basically.
That's great. And again, great to hear like a business taking the same skills-based approach, but just on a slightly different side of the coin. So it's really always interesting to hear about other companies doing that. What about then thinking broadly about data roles? So into your team, I imagine you're hiring data scientists, maybe data analysts as well. In your view at the moment in the hiring market, what is the biggest challenge? Like, what are the biggest pain points for you personally as a data leader?
Yeah, I mean, there are a number of, obviously, I think, and previous guests of yours have talked about many problems. And I think that maybe apart from the sheer number of people applying for a job and the number of completely irrelevant applications, basically, even in the pool of potentially relevant people, it's hard to decipher or to just to kind of pick out the real gems from the pack just based on the CV, and that is always the hardest thing. And I mean, I have in my mind a way that I feel like there is a good way to do a CV and a bad way, and for me the good way is it is skill based. It is around, hey, I have these skills related to this experience, and this is how I use them, basically in your CV. So I know that you have an understanding of your role. You have some self-reflection of how you did it, and so on, and you have read the job description and tailored it to this job because you want to be in this job. You want this. It's not just some blanket CV that you've sent out. So I think that is often the hardest part. Most CVs are pretty, I feel, poor, really. And I don't think I've seen too many AI generated ones yet, but I'm sure they're definitely coming in force soon. But yeah, so that's probably the toughest thing is the hiring manager and we talk together at the beginning of the process. We say, we kind of discuss what am I looking for a person. We predefine before we even put out the job ad what the role is, the roles and responsibilities, everything. We have it all there. As we then talk about it, what are you looking for? They even then almost sample the incoming applications that they get, and then we discuss them together so that they get a better feel as well as to what the filtering system should look like. And then we go from there. But when I sit down and look at the CVs that I get, I always struggle to say, right, that this one, they're going to be able to do the job because they're never informative enough for me, basically, I would say.
Yeah, it's so tricky when our current system of hiring, at least through jobs boards, I think has a few big flaws. One of them is, okay, so it's an open system. Anyone can apply, which is good because that's at least liberated. Like everyone has an opportunity in theory to click apply and get their CV in front of the hiring manager, as opposed to some kind of closed referral-based system where none of the jobs are actually advertised. Like I feel like we could end up going down that path, which might be worse. At the moment, it's open, but then that creates a problem of the noise and the spam and that anyone can apply with any CV, no matter how irrelevant it is. And the sense we're getting at the moment is candidates might be doing that automatically, so that then the marginal cost to the candidate of applying is almost zero if they can use a tool to automate it. So then I suspect that's maybe going to cause even more spam or irrelevant applications. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's inevitable that we're going to have some kind of AI filtering on right at the beginning to kind of try to stem the flow. I feel like it will come come to us. But that in itself was also dangerous. I personally feel like I don't want to devalue someone's effort when someone truly puts an effort into an application. And I don't want us to be able to just auto reject them because their CV looked a bit wrong for whatever reason, right? So if we were to like add like some filtering level in front, it would have to be, like a high recall kind of process, not worried so much on the precision, but just to catch those really obvious cases. So maybe that's one way we could go about it in the future. I would be very cautious on it because I feel like when someone applies for a job, this is a very personal thing. They and a lot of people put a lot of effort into applying. And like I said, I just don't want to devalue their effort. We should treat everyone that's applying like with some respect. And I guess on the flip side, I also expect that they treat the company with respect as well and value our time at the same time.
Yeah, it's such a tricky equation because with such high application volumes, then a lot of companies simply can't read every CV manually, even if they wanted to. I agree. There's probably going to be this AI screening layer that's introduced eventually. I think probably for companies, the tricky bit is because it's A, AI, and because B, it's people data. It fits into two quite high risk, highly sensitive areas that I think will make it just quite slow for the applications to actually be used, even though at the moment, like you could clearly do AI CV screening with Claude or ChatGPT. And I've heard of lots of companies who kind of hacked together their own little skunk works. But for like an official product, I feel like it's got quite a high barrier to get through before it actually gets used and implemented.
I think that it's interesting when you talk about all of like the personal data and kind of the responsible component to it, because I also feel like I suspect because the EU has a new AI Act out as well, that you would absolutely have to also tell the candidate that you were filtered out through AI as well, which is only fair that you would say that, I feel, and it would be a responsibility for anyone, any EU company anyway, to do that. So there might, I think that's a good thing because we then have to take a more cautious approach. You're kind of forced to do that. So but I agree that it is. I mean, it's a scaling problem indeed. Like for some company, that offers a filtering service, it would be it would be a challenge. But I'm sure someone's out there doing it.
One thing I was thinking about recently is just the thresholds and almost like the standards that we are expecting from AI versus what we expect from humans. So, as an analogy, as far as I'm aware, I'm not an expert, but driverless cars are already way safer than human-driven cars. Yet, anytime there's like a Tesla that's auto crashed and someone's died, which is terrible, that's like front page news. But there's literally 100,000 human crashes a day. That's not magnified at the same level. So I feel like sometimes we're holding technology to almost too high an expectation. I would argue that maybe for AI and hiring, we also are already feeling like that, because I feel like the way hiring's currently done with humans is so biased and unfair that it's hard for me to imagine how AI could make it worse. I'll give you one particular example. That is, there's been a lot of experiments done at the application stage just to test, like, are certain names from certain ethnic backgrounds ever discriminated against? And so there's lots of these experiments that have been done in different countries. One in Australia tested, were Chinese people discriminated against in the labor market here? And so the way they do the experiments is getting these thousands of CVs, grouping them into buckets just based on the name. So one bucket had an Anglo first and last name. Second bucket had a Anglo first name, Chinese last name. Third bucket had Chinese first and last name. They then go and apply to thousands of different jobs, different industries, different cities, blah, 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 and then measure the rate at which those 3 sets of CVs got a callback from the employer. And so this study from a few years ago from Sydney Uni found that the first group, which had Anglo first and last names, got a 12% callback. The third group, which had Chinese first and last names, got a 4% callback only. So like a third as high a callback rate. So if that's the current way hiring's done with humans, maybe we shouldn't be so risk averse with AI because the system's already so flawed and unfair. You know, how can we make it worse? In a sense, is partly what I'm thinking, but maybe there's something I'm missing.
Yeah, I think that it's again, I think the right tool for the right job, right? So you can like using ChatGPT I feel is inappropriate, say for this task. But I get your point. Yes, humans have biases, but AI has the same. Like has plenty of bias in itself because it's just learned from us. It just knows what we did and it's replicating it. That's what AI does, right? So, you know, you could do a lot of work to try and like fix the biases in AI, but whenever you fix one, you introduce another, or there are unseen consequences to doing that. I think there's a lot of studies and a lot of kind of people looking at bias in humans and human recruiting. And I think it's, you know, it's pretty clear what those are, right? So in your example around names, for example, I think you could introduce a tool that just blanks out the name, right? So at each stage, of course, you need to know the person's name, right? So it's, but at each stage of the process, there's a tool that just, you know, redacts the names, the maybe the picture if they've included a picture, and then once they have been accepted or rejected, only at that point is that redaction removed at each stage of the process or something, or maybe only at the first stage because usually the HR obviously needs to know who the person is and all of that, and and the second stage usually is more technical interview or something, and of course you'll need to know who you're interviewing, but only after you've accepted, right, that this person is right. So removing like the ability to have that bias maybe is a more appropriate way. So yeah, just making sure that we use the right tool, and yeah. So I really don't feel like a blanket use of AI is a good idea. It's just as flawed as us, potentially more. I don't know. We don't know always either. So yeah, just be careful about it is what is what I'm saying. Yeah.
One thing I would say is, at least in theory, in favor of AI or any kind of programmatic way to kind of be evaluating candidates in the hiring process, either at the CV stage, the interview stage, the test stage, whatever, is if you do it in a structured way using a large language model, using a program, using some kind of definable method, at least that can be transparent. So for example, you have a CV screening system where it's like, okay, hey, LLM, take the bits of this CV that are relevant. Cool. Now match them against a job description, give it like 1 point per match or a match strength or whatever, come up with some number. This CV scored 70%. Here's its strongest points. Here's its weakest points. At least that's data now that could be interrogated and potentially shared with the candidate as well with feedback. At the moment, we don't have that at all because it's just someone clicking a button rejects on a system. Who knows why they rejected them? There's no real feedback loop there or any kind of, oversight at all. I mean, you know, there could be any kind of racist recruiter running riot, rejecting anyone whose name they don't like, and we would not know. At least, again, in theory, with a well-built AI system or any kind of programmatic system, maybe you'd have that data there to go back and go, you know what? It was consistently rejecting this kind of person or doing whatever, because then there's an opportunity for transparency, at least, I think.
I mean, I don't think that you need AI to have that oversight, right? Because if you have a system that records who is being accepted, rejected by a recruiter, you have the metrics, you have the data there to look back at it and say, okay, well, we can clearly see that they've rejected this type of person consistently, disproportionately to everyone else. So, yeah, I think we just by the sheer numbers of people being applying and actually the number of CVs being read, we have potentially all that data anyway to say, okay, this hiring recruiter is not doing a good job. So I don't know how AI helps you in that way.
I feel like the difference would be the why, because the AI or any system, be it driven by AI or not, go, well, here's the scoring, the logic for how we scored this is X, here's the score Y. But at the moment, it's like CV rejected by a person at this time is the most data we would have. We wouldn't know why they chose that. And it's clearly a subjective decision that even they themselves probably couldn't explain a week later or 2 weeks later, having reviewed 500 CVs.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. I mean, I think that if we were to introduce some kind of filtering at the beginning, I think that's, I think that you're right. It's fair that there is an explanation for the rejection. And on the automatic rejection filtering, if we will put something of that up front, we could just, we could then present this back to the user as well to say, to the applicant, sorry, that, you didn't have Python in your CV, therefore you have, we have rejected your CV. I think that there is still a lot of space where AI doesn't understand nuance. It doesn't, and I get what you're saying, like qualitative versus quantitative. Are we, shouldn't we just be able to kind of have a metric for everything? I don't think we can. I don't think any metric that we come up with, apart from like what's on the CV, like explicitly mentioned and needs to be in the role, doesn't, we will probably have some qualitative component to work out what that value is and then assign that value. So why, you could do that, I guess, but that's not going to help the applicant. Like if you say, you got 2 out of 5 for suitability, okay, what does that mean? Then you have to provide a sheet as to what these metrics are and then you get into trouble again as to how did you really define that? And I don't think you can get around that in the hiring process. There is always going to be some subjective component. I think that adding some quantitative values, as in they're more like objective guardrails, I would say, that maybe. So, making sure that things are reproducible, that you're making the same types of decisions for every applicant, and so on. That's where it's useful, but not like as like these are it must be above this value or below this value. I don't think works fully.
Part of the issue, even if we went down this track of, let's use AI-based CV screening, which does seem inevitable to me that we'll get to that point in the next, year or so, is still the old garbage in, garbage out problem, because it's still a CV. Even if we can automate it, so we make it faster, maybe we make it arguably more objective, maybe there's new biases we might introduce, we can solve that problem, but it's still a pretty crap data set to make a decision on. And I'm sure you've experienced interviewing people who look amazing on paper, that the AI would also think look amazing on paper, but then sadly disappoint you in that first interview. So I wonder if we're going to need a new screening data set. Like, do we need something we need to know more about the candidate. We need to validate something, that we earlier in the hiring process. And if so, what would that be?
I mean, the validation is the interviews, right? That's validation. That's what it is. So, um, yeah, I really would veer away from like using AI to like validate people. I would say, yeah, just as for a checklist of things that must be there and are not there, fine. But yeah, when it comes to validation, that's the interview process. Are they a reasonable person? Are they, are they for the HR, for the hiring manager, the first stage? Do they, meet the bare minimum requirements for this job and so on? And then in the technical interview, you're validating their skills. You're also to some level also validating their skills and many skills, right? So not just the technical ones, but also critical thinking and all of these other things which are valuable. That's where the validation goes. So validation process, yeah, that's just hiring. That's just interviews. I feel.
Yes, I see what you mean. I guess the challenge is, if there's such a high volume of candidates and the CV might become increasingly inaccurate and it was already a poor predictor, like if people are just going to start using ChatGPT to bullshit a CV, then like it might end up being so inaccurate that you have to interview, I don't know, 50 people to hire one, which would be a complete waste of time.
Yeah, I honestly don't know if I have an answer for that. Like what my I think there is probably a component of what industry you're in, what type of work you're doing, that also matters. So, like in a lot of like more like tech jobs and things like that, that LinkedIn is everyone's CVs are there and they're kind of validated in some sense there by you assigning the where you worked basically. But for other types of jobs, LinkedIn is not where you find a job or where people are using it, and then the validation becomes tougher in that component. But you could, yeah, use other sources, of course, potentially to just to do like a validation in that sense. But that's not a blanket method, I feel. Yeah.
One aspect of hiring that personally I feel like is especially on the subjective end of the spectrum is the cultural fit interviews. So I'd love to get your thoughts on those. Do you use them? If so, what are you asking? How are you trying to evaluate candidates? Have you ever tried to like measure cultural fit, or is it something that's just kind of inherently a bit more intuitive and a bit more subjective?
Mm. Yeah, at SkillLab, we definitely use them. That's usually the third interview in the process. And I mean, over my career, I've seen various versions of this, and I think what's important is that you have some values in the company, right? You can tangibly, like what they are. Everyone knows what they are. And I think as an impact business, also it's maybe even a little bit easier to have like some really well-defined values potentially. And for us, it's like purpose-driven, collaboration, and learning mindset are like the three kind of core values for us, right? And then it's about asking the questions in as kind of less personal way as possible, and in the sense they are very personal questions. But I mean, you want to avoid people interpreting these as, oh, I just didn't really like the way they answered that as a justification as to why they didn't pass, why they think they didn't pass the culture fit interview, but rather you need to be able to justify well to the group of people in the hiring committee, which we have at the end, why why you feel they wouldn't fit in SkillLab based on the answer they gave. So very much about, can they do this? Can they do that? Not, I don't know if that will fit in the company, but rather have really defined questions around our values, around learning mindset, right? What are you really excited to learn, right? And then you can say, well, this person wasn't, they didn't have a very convincing answer. They didn't seem very enthusiastic about anything. They didn't have anything on mind, right? Whereas another candidate was, they had like a list of things that they wanted to do and wanted to learn, and they think that they can do that at SkillLab because of this and this and this. And then you're right, that's a great, there's a contrast there, and that's great. So, and I've seen in the culture, in the hiring process at the end, when we're looking at like the culture fit stage as well, the hiring manager has called people out on talking more about like that they don't feel like this person will fit. And so we take it very seriously, that we try to be objective in how we look at this. So based on, can they do the things that we ask them about? And so it's worked really well for us. At SkillLab, we're very diverse. I'm not sure, I think we're 25 nationalities, maybe more. We have about 60 people in the company at the moment, so it's quite a very diverse company. And yeah, culturally, culture fit, it sounds like, it must be, everyone that's in the Netherlands is like they all have the same culture. Therefore, no, that's not what SkillLab is. We have people from around the world, and yet everyone kind of has the same values. They're all working towards the same things, and we all get along very well. Actually, it's quite it's a very nice environment. So I feel like, culture fit is a winner.
The way you described it then made me suddenly think maybe we shouldn't call it cultural fit, because anytime I hear that, I feel like that seems like the opposite of diversity-based hiring, because they seem like an oxymoron to me. Maybe it's more like values fit, and then I don't care where you come from as long as you have the same core values. Maybe it's almost a misnomer at the moment.
Yeah, but again, values is also, you could argue, is also sounds a bit charged as well, depending on how you think of it. I'm not sure if there is I agree, like culture fit sounds also a little bit leading, but I don't know if there is a good way to describe it. I think it's more that you take it seriously, and you take it and you do align it to your values as a company, not as people, so to speak. I can't think of a better name, to be honest.
One thing I was thinking about recently when it comes to cultural fit interviews is maybe we might not give candidates enough credit for being adaptable. And so what I mean by that is we're taking their interview performance, and that's all we've got to go off, is maybe their CV and how they come across in an interview, and we have to make a hiring decision. So it's obviously, we're dealing with a kind of limited sample size problem, but we basically have to kind of guess whether or not they're going to fit in with a culture based on that interview performance. As someone who recently was traveling, I went to 3 very different cities. I went to Amsterdam, I went to Bangkok, and Riyadh. And they could not be 3 more different places than where I live in Sydney. And what I noticed as I was going there was that, you go to a new place and you kind of quickly get a feel for how people act and behave. So I arrived in Riyadh. My friend picked me up from the airport. I was wearing gym shorts. He's like, put on some pants. Come on. I put on some pants. Just as a starting point, let's at least get those skinny white legs covered up, okay? Right. And then in Bangkok, you go and interact with someone. Maybe you're going to get a coffee or something. After you take the coffee and give your money, you can't just like immediately walk away. There's a kind of almost a moment of reflection and bowing and saying thank you properly and looking someone in the eyes. It will be rude to just start off like you're in a rush. And so you wouldn't know that unless you went there and you'd experience these cultures. And you'd have to also be quite disagreeable to not suddenly start acting like everyone else around you. There would be, like, most people would change their behavior, I think, a little bit. So is there something to be said for maybe thinking that if the candidate's adaptable, then maybe even if it feels like they're not the right fit in an interview, maybe we should give them the benefit of the doubt? What do you reckon?
Yeah, so I think that it's really about trying to avoid that kind of even that decision. I think when you talk, so asking the questions about can they do this rather than they were acting differently than we would expect. Therefore, they weren't fit. Try kind of does its best to avoid that situation altogether. So if you can avoid it and try not to take culture into account in some sense, then like I said, we have 25 different nationalities, maybe more. I'm not 100% sure. And everyone has a different way of acting and what they find acceptable and not. And we have still kind of meshed together people that are very different into a really cohesive team. And so I think that it's about avoiding it rather than adapting to it, so to speak. Yeah.
And if you think back to the candidates you've interviewed who have maybe fallen down a cultural fit interview, a technical interview at different stages, are there kind of recurring patterns? Like, if you had to kind of group common themes as to why candidates might not ultimately get hired, can you think of any common patterns?
Well, I think that on the technical interview side, it's usually a mismatch, right? That's always the obvious one, that what they said in the CV and what they can do is obviously very different. And so that's worthy. Even if you could come back from that, it's really a disappointment. Essentially, I don't think you're going to win out in the end there. So from the technical interviews, it's more around people not listening to you, that they don't they don't want to, they don't they want to either do it themselves, they want to show that they can do it for themselves, and that's already a red flag, right? That's like there's no like they haven't really understood collaboration and so on. And we always say up front, please ask us, please talk to us if you don't understand something or you're getting stuck, or we will help you. But they ignore that, right? So these people would not likely make it through, right? So I don't want someone to go away and solve something on their own, because collaboration is like super important in any company, right? You can't solve problems on your own. You as a company, you need to work together. It's very clear. So that's kind of one of those attributes that in the technical side that would definitely mean that they're not going to make it through.
And just to jump in, so you would evaluate that because in the interview, you're almost giving them a live problem to kind of solve on the spot. And if they don't ask you for help, then that's where you get that uncollaborative kind of vibe from them.
Yeah, exactly. So I really like the live coding, the live problem solving interview. It's not for everyone, but I'm very like I said, I tell them really upfront, like, please ask me anything. I'm really here to help you, like let's solve this thing. And I have a predefined set of things that they need to do, but I don't tell them what those are. I present it in the interview. So it's not that I don't want them, you consider things like, this is a live interview. This is really some people for the first time, maybe they haven't done coding in front of people before. So I don't want to add the extra pressure that, I'm only 10% of the way through this thing, right? Because people freeze up and because they took too long on this, right? And I'm not so interested in that they can get through everything, but rather how they did it, that they can also collaborate and learn. So yeah, I'm a big fan of that kind of interview. So yeah, that's where you see it for sure.
Yeah, it must be for some candidates a little anxiety inducing to do live coding. If I just think about myself, last time I worked in an office, if someone came across to my desk and asked me to start chopping some SQL, I think I would lose the ability to use my fingers pretty quickly. but I guess the alternative only is really the take-home test, isn't it? Which has its own pros and cons anyway, because it normally takes the candidate way longer to do, and then you open up the opportunity for cheating, I guess. So is the live interview for you just maybe like the most efficient way to get an understanding of their skills?
Yeah, I think so. I think it becomes very clear very quickly who will work and who will not work, basically. And yeah, I think the take home assignment, yeah, especially around coding, is no point these days. There's no point in sending them a coding assignment whatsoever, like take home, because I mean, you're just gonna get a bunch of ChatGPT results, right? Fine. You can use ChatGPT. At least that's a minimum requirement probably of a job anyway these days. But for example, I give maybe a task of, can you define pick a model on Hugging Face, and can you give me a model card of this model? And even if they just copy pasted whatever information from Hugging Face, put it in ChatGPT, and produce something for me, I then ask the follow-up questions, of course, during the interview. And even if they've never seen it, they don't know much about it, I would expect that they have been able to reflect on it and they understand it, and so on, right? So you can get around in those kind of cases, but on purely technical things, I don't find any value in the take home anymore. Yeah.
What is your view more broadly then of candidates using AI in the hiring process? So you've basically said, well, one whole step is, in your view, null and void because it's too impacted by AI. What about, for example, if they were trying to use AI during your interview, like if they were doing it remotely, is that fair game? Would you have a problem with that? What's your views?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously I don't have a problem with people using AI to code, because that is how you should do it these days, quite frankly. But in the interview, I asked them not to use generative AI of any kind, because I just want to understand their level, where their understanding is, what their critical thinking is. So, and if you're using some Gen AI tool, it removes a lot of those components essentially, and that's fine when you're doing the job and you need to get it done quickly, but not when I want to see what you are capable of, what you understand, essentially. So then I'm more. So that's why I asked that they do not use generative AI. You lose. I have some times, where you have suspect interviewees who are, looking off screen and oh, I'm sorry, I'm having a problem doing this or that, and so on. But okay, I mean, I don't know if they're doing it or not. And usually those people are, they're not quick enough. They're not, like, you can kind of, you get a sense. So it's like, it's a bit too awkward, the whole interview. So they're not doing themselves favors by doing it. But yeah. So.
Yeah, until we get Neuralink or some direct brain access to ChatGPT, it's going to be too slow, isn't it? To like listen to interview question, look at ChatGPT response, put that back into your own words, answer question. Surely that's too complicated. You may as well just try to do the interview yourself rather than relying on an LLM, I would have thought.
Yeah, exactly. I have thought about maybe integrating like some kind of prompt engineering component to the interview, just to see, you know, this is the problem. How do you get the best thing out of ChatGPT, basically, to solve it? For example, just to see what people's experiences are in it, because it is important to know how to successfully prompt as well. Natural language on its own is not always going to give you the best answers. So there could be an extra component in future interviews as we're really moving just into this new era of coding.
Yeah, when I've spoken to hiring managers who are doing some kind of project take-home test, they've by and large said, well, yeah, I know they're going to use AI. That's fine. I want to know how they're using AI. So they almost go past the first level of, oh, this weird game where one person's pretending like they're not using and the company's hoping they're not. They go, no, no, you're going to use it. It's fine. How have you used it exactly in detail? Let's start scrutinizing that. And then you can almost get down an extra layer and yeah, start evaluating this new skill that I guess everyone needs to have at the moment.
I think it's a really interesting topic in itself as to whether or not generative AI is going to ruin critical thinking for next generations and so on. People, I think that, you know, like in the next 5 years or so, I don't think that I'm not a forecaster, but you know, in the foreseeable future, probably it's generative AI is still going to hallucinate plenty. It doesn't have reasoning. It doesn't reflect on what it's giving you in any way. So we're always going to need a human in the loop, so to speak, to review the output, right? And you need to understand to get the best outputs. You also need to understand it, like, even if it's just on a larger, like on a bigger scale level, not in all of the specific details. You still need to have a good understanding, and I think junior candidates should. I think it's kind of a shame if they rely on generative AI to do these things for them, because I think they're losing out on learning. Because we need to learn, we need experience, we need to fail, we need to like go through the mundane, painful stuff to actually like get that experience, right? It's it's tough, and if you don't do that, then yeah, how are you going to be able to reflect on what generative AI gave you? Like, yeah, it looks right. Okay, I'm just gonna copy paste this into this report. They're not going to think, well, okay, this is not quite right. Maybe we could think this is interesting, but maybe we should reframe this in a different way, or so on. I think potentially we're going to lose that ability if we just rely on these tools.
Yeah, I've thought similar, and I know a lot of software engineers would say they don't really know what the solution is until they start writing it. It's like the thinking is the writing; it's all intertwined. But then part of me thinks, well, I don't know, 50 years ago, people had to solder their own motherboards together and write machine code and then low-level code and high-level code, and we keep adding these layers of abstraction where now it's just natural language convert to code. Maybe it's just that process could become so accurate that then it's null and void for us to understand it in any detail. But I guess how long will that take?
Yeah, I agree. I don't know if at least these current LLMs are ever going to solve hallucination based on the underlying technology doesn't allow that. At least we haven't come up with that solution. So until you can be really confident that this is right, as like you just hired some data analysts to do this, then yeah, you need someone to reflect on it. And even when you like give a junior analyst a task, right, to do something, you probably also check it before, like if it's going to to a client or something, right? There's probably another check anyway, right, from someone else. So yeah, I don't think anytime soon we can rely on it. And I would advise more junior people to like fine, you can use generative AI maybe as a guide, but then go back and try it yourself, or I don't know, at the very minimum, basically.
Yeah, I've noticed a tendency of some people to use ChatGPT and almost go, well, this is what it gave me, as opposed to, well, I've used it as a tool to solve my task. It's my responsibility. And the fact that I've made it more efficient is good for me, but I still have to own it. Whereas I get the sense from some people like, oh, well, here's the answer it gave me. But, well, no, it's still your job to figure it out. Whether or not it works is on you.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Aaron, as one final question, I'm wondering, is there anyone or any company you've seen who does hiring in a really interesting or good way that you've learned a lot from, and perhaps incorporate it into your own process?
Yeah, I would say I'm kind of happy with SkillLab's hiring process in general. I think it, and also from myself, right? I was hired by SkillLab, and I really enjoyed the hiring process, and I really got a sense of them valuing me, and yeah, that was really very different, actually, to be honest, to many other interviews I've been through. So I really like that. I like that people just are really respectful of people's time and energy, right? I think that this is something you must have in your hiring process. In terms of specific things, I mean, in the past, I worked at a bank, and interviewing for banking roles is pretty intensive, and you go through many rounds in a day, maybe even multiple days. And what I actually took away from it was, and I think it's used everywhere in the big tech companies and things as well, of course, is the brain teaser. And I very much, I have a particular brain teaser that I like to ask, and it's not that there is an answer, right? It's open. It's just like, how would you solve this very broad problem where there's no one's worked out the answer, right? Like, it's not something feasible, and just kind of ask them to describe to you how they're going to solve this, or how they would solve this. What assumptions are you making? All these types of things, right? And it's a really good indicator to me, not really of yes or no for hiring, but rather, how will I work with this person? Is this person someone that is detail oriented? They need like the details of the tasks, or are they someone that kind of can go away and kind of work on their own a bit more? They're not so independent, right? Things like that. So you can, and it's been 100% indicator for me, basically. And it's also, yeah, also a little bit of fun, because it's very interesting, the very different ways people answer things. Yeah.
Yeah, I've experienced a few of those brain teasers myself in my junior years, going for consulting and banking roles. And yeah, I can remember a few of them. We won't ask you to leak your favorite one, because then candidates can prepare. So it's better to see it, like, hear their answer for the first time, I'm sure. So there you go. A tip there for people to evaluate candidates, get those brain teasers out, those how many balls can fit into a 747, those styles of questions, potentially, and get those creative juices flowing from the candidates.
Yeah.
Well, Aaron, it's been a great conversation today. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing all of your insights with our audience.
No, thanks a lot, Tim. It was fun.